Ayman Khan here for Seconds Out. It's a pleasure to be joined by the one and only, one of the best minds for boxing, one of my favorite people to speak to, Kevin Barry. It's been a while, as we said, off camera, but glad to hear you've had a great Christmas and New Year, and the gym is busy and thriving, Kevin.
Mate, the gym is busy, not so much in boxing, but we have about 36 NFL players in there doing their off-season at the moment. So my son Taylor is very, very busy, and I've been sort of assisting him over the last couple of years, and that's been our new focus.
Brilliant. You got a lot of time to spend at the gym and a lot of time this weekend to devote to watching a brilliant card of boxing in the offing.
Amazing card.
Got to get straight to not quite the main event, but it could have been a main event on another day in the form of Daniel Dubois defending his world title against Joe Parker. Kevin, going straight into this, having trained Joe Parker beforehand, what do you make of Joe's ascent towards this moment, his recent run in boxing?
Well, I'll tell you what, mate. For me, this is like the main event. And I'm really, really happy that Joe's got himself in this position. If we remember back to 2016, 8 years ago, over 8 years ago, when he won the title against Andy Ruiz as a 24-year-old. Well, 9 years have passed now, and here he is once again finding himself in a position to challenge for the heavyweight title of the world. As soon as Daniel Dubois demolished Anthony Joshua last September, it was very, very obvious to me that a new star had been born in boxing. And when you have a new star, it's very important that that star has the right opponents for the star to become brighter. It was also very, very obvious to me that there was only one opponent who could fight Daniel Dubois at that time, and it was Joseph Parker. And he was sitting there coming off two tremendous wins in the last 12 months. The fights against Deontay Wilder were as a heavy underdog. He defied all odds and got up to win. And so they, fighting a puncher of the power of Wilder, they backed it up by fighting Zhilei Zhang, who was just demolishing everybody. And, Parker found himself on the canvas a couple of times, but he got up, he got the job done. His conditioning was better, his durability was better, his stamina was better, and he won a really, really good points decision. And that was March of 2024. And since then, Joe has been waiting patiently for his opportunity. So when Dubois beat Anthony Joshua, in my mind, there was only one opponent that he could fight, and that was Joseph Parker, a guy who ticks all the boxes. Very experienced, former world champion, terrific with the media, has performed outstanding as an underdog in his last two fights. And against Dubois, he's actually in a fight that he has a really good chance of winning.
Same sort of question for Daniel Dubois. What is your assessment of his run towards this moment, especially off the back of that brilliant knockout against Anthony Joshua?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've been watching Dubois for the last few years. In fact, actually, I watched him for when I used to work with Joe for the 8 years that we were together. Dubois was a guy who was younger than everyone else, was making a menacing name for himself as a power puncher. Very, very, very powerful guy, very physical guy. In fact, talking to a lot of people about Daniel Dubois, other heavyweight fighters who have been in training camps with them, everyone says the same thing. It's the hardest they've ever been hit. So we know Dubois has got great punching power. Then he got his opportunity You know, to step into the really bright lights against Usyk, and I don't think he was prepared for that situation. He was still developing. He was still growing. I think he had a lot of flaws early in his career, but right now at the age of 27, coming off three terrific performances, the knockouts of Jarrell Miller, the knockouts of Filip Hrgovic, and the demolition of Anthony Joshua. You know, Dubois shows everyone that, like, he is the form fighter in the heavyweight division. He is the biggest puncher in heavyweight boxing at the moment. But who is the guy who has time and time again fought the biggest punchers in the heavyweight division? Joseph Parker. You go back to Andy Ruiz, Anthony Joshua, Dillian White, Joe Joyce, Wilder, Zhang, and now he is fighting Daniel Dubois. Parker's been in with all the big punchers, and he knows how to fight the big punches. He's defensively a very good fighter. He's a very skillful fighter. He moves very well. When you look at this fight, I think the first 6 rounds of the fight are very dangerous for Joe. I think, and I'm sure that he's not going to meet Dubois in the middle of the ring and try and trade with him, because, you know, Joseph Parker is a 65% win by knockout heavyweight. He's not the biggest puncher in the division, but he's definitely one of the most skillful fighters in the division. So I think, you know, the first 6 rounds of this fight for me are very, very dangerous for Parker. After that, I think the last six rounds could be very hard for Dubois. So it's a fight of two halves, and it's a fight that I can see both guys winning.
Let me ask you to break that down a little bit further from a Parker perspective. What do those first and second rounds look like if Joe Parker is going to get the victory at the final bell?
Well, I'll tell you what, we know that Joe's got good movement. He throws a good feint. He's got a good jab. I also believe Dubois got a pretty good jab. I think Dubois got a very underrated jab. So I think, you know, it's a fight where it's important that Parker doesn't get careless early. It's a fight that he fights very, very disciplined and very smart. And I think, especially in the middle zone, he needs to tie Dubois up. If Dubois can push forward, which we know he's going to come forward. He came forward. You know, Joshua was a bigger puncher than Parker, and he came straight at Joshua. You know, he wasn't intimidated by Joshua's size, by his right hand. He just came straight at him. And I'll tell you one thing that I thought was the difference in the fight with Anthony Joshua is that, and this comes with experience, and this comes with confidence, and this comes with belief in yourself. Dubois threw punches when Joshua threw punches. He punched through the combinations. A lot of fighters will wait until the other fighter gets his punches off. He'll catch them, then they'll come back. Dubois was prepared to back himself to trade with Joshua. So when Joshua threw, he threw. And that's what really impressed me in that demolition of Anthony Joshua in September.
So much of the heavyweight division, I guess, is factored upon how heavy is the punch of the person throwing it. From Joe Parker's perspective, as you mentioned there, 65% knockout ratio of his opponents. Does he have the power to keep Dubois off of him, who Dubois has shown that he's got a chin on him so far?
Well, Joe had a lot of the knockouts earlier in his career, and a lot of those knockouts were with his hand speed. As the years have gone by, he's put more size on, and I think he's given up a little bit of speed for strength and size to fight those bigger heavyweights. I think, against Wilder and Zhang, um, Wilder was like a dead man walking, and Parker couldn't get him out. And then we saw what Zhang done the very next fight, knocked him stone cold in 5 rounds. But that's not Joe's game. Parker's game is not to knock you out. Parker's game is to be smarter than you, to be a better boxer than you, to score more points than you, and to take your game plan away and work to his. And I'm pretty sure that's what he's going to be doing with Dubois. He's going to be defensive early. He's going to be careful that he doesn't get hit with anything clean early, and he's gonna chip away, and hopefully hopefully he can break him down a little bit into those later rounds. But at the moment, Daniel Dubois is the most powerful fighter in the heavyweight division. He's got the dynamite in both hands, and that makes him an exciting fighter. I think I mentioned before about A Star Is Born. I really think that the British people, if he can get the job done against Parker, I think we'll have a new star in heavyweight boxing.
In amongst the pre-fight build-up, Andy Lee has been asked and was he speaking about Daniel Dubois, and he's made mention, to paraphrase him here, that he feels that Daniel Dubois might have that little bit of mental fragility. We've seen that happen a couple of times in his fights with Joe Joyce and recently to Alexander Usyk. But as a trainer of fighters, Kevin, do you look at opponents when you're game planning for them? Do you look at those apparent calls of being a quitter in the ring and see that this is a weakness, this is someone that we can get at?
Look, no, obviously, I think you have to look at everything, both early in the fighter's career and currently, and try and dissect it. And it's very fair what Andy Lee is saying. There has been flaws. But then I looked at the last 3 performances. Two of them, the fight with Gerald Miller and the fight with Filip Hrgovic, knocking out guys who are undefeated and who had never been knocked out before. Especially, I tell you what, I think the Gerald Miller fight really showed a lot to me. When we were looking at Dubois, there were enormous questions about his confidence, his desire to fight when the going really got tough, and I think it was fair for people to say that. But then when I looked at that performance where Gerald Miller never stopped coming forward the whole fight, and he brought it to him, and he stood there, and he traded with him, and he dug deep when he really, really had to, and he knocked him out and knocked him unconscious in the end of the fight. I think that fight showed a lot to the boxing public, and it also showed a lot to Daniel Dubois that he can perform under pressure. He can perform when the going really gets tough. And then we saw it in the next fight against Filip Hrgovic, where Hrgovic hit him a few times, and he come back and busted him up and broke him down, and the fight was ended. And then the Joshua fight, where he was an underdog, where a lot of the British fans thought, here we go. Anthony Joshua now is going to become a 3-time world heavyweight champion. And he was completely demolished by Dubois. So I think that, when a fighter's confidence is up, he's very, very dangerous. When we talked about the British fans thinking that Joshua was going to become a 3-time champion, I tell you what, there's a lot of New Zealanders at the moment who are thinking that their man, Joseph Parker, is going to become a 2-time world heavyweight champion by beating Dubois this week.
Just on Daniel Dubois, just talking about those fights, when it comes down to Dubois, at the top of the list when people talk about the concerns on the other side of the coin, if you're facing him, is that punch power. Is that the biggest thing to his game, do you feel, and the biggest factor that will tell if you're Daniel Dubois that you'll just be able to punch through the target in Joe?
Look, obviously he's a very scary puncher and a guy with natural power. Um, we all know the stories going right back to when he was an amateur, when he was knocking pros out. So he came into the game as a reputation of being very, very powerful. And I think as his boxing IQ has improved and developed, and as he has matured, he's now a 27-year-old. I believe that physically and mentally, he's peaking at the moment. This is him at the top of his game. And obviously, he's not just a powerful guy. He's developed as a smart fighter. I talked before about how when Joshua was throwing, he was throwing. And that's a skill on its own. That's timing. It's when you time your opponent when he's punching you. And a lot of fighters can't do that. A lot of fighters won't punch or they won't step to the fire. Dubois will do that. He will back himself. He backs his own chin, and he backs his own boxing skills to land his punches. I think we looking at going back 3 or 4 fights. You look at Joe Joyce, and Joyce was a plodding, slow heavyweight, and he was able to put hands on Joseph Parker. Daniel Dubois is a lot faster and more complete fighter than Joe Joyce, which makes him a very, very dangerous opponent for Parker.
Putting that all into the mix now, and I really appreciate that breakdown, but somewhat cruelly, I've got to put you on the spot. How do you feel the fight goes? Who do you think gets their hands raised?
Look, I think that I'm a big believer in fighters peaking at a certain time. And I tell you what, I look back to 2023 when a Jack Massey won a bunch of rounds, a cruiserweight, won a bunch of rounds off Joseph Parker. And, if Joe can actually get this job done on Saturday, it'll be a momentous, mammoth turnaround from a performance like that to a performance by beating a guy like Dubois. I think that Dubois at the age of 27, peaking at full strength and full power, is going to be a very difficult opponent for Joseph Parker to beat.
Can you tell us what it will mean for Joe to pick up that world title for the second time, having guided him to his first world title?
Oh, look, I tell you what, I'm sure that you look at parts of a fighter's career. I was fortunate to spend those first 8 years with him, and he had a great journey. And he sort of I talked about the Massey fight before and the Joe Joyce fights, and these weren't his best performances, but he strung two really good performances together as the underdog against Wilder, who was shot, and then Zhilei Zhang, who's still a very live guy. Parker has fought his way back to a position to fight for the world title. And I know that Joe has many times talked about, my goal is to fight everyone and to become the world heavyweight champion. So I know this means a lot to him. He's obviously worked very, very hard. He's put a bunch of size on now. Like, last fight he was 248, which he's obviously feeling good at that weight. But I just wonder, how hard it is and what you give up when you put that much size on a person's body. You probably give up some of your work rate, some of your output. But he's done that because he's been fighting a lot of big, powerful guys, and he's felt that he's needed to put more size on. When we talk about weight, Daniel Dubois at 248 for his last fight was the heaviest that he's been. He was 245 the fight before against Herkovich. and in the 230s for the fight against Gerald Miller. So he's now at a different weight than what he's been fighting at.
Last question. I'll keep it short and sweet because I really appreciate your time and that breakdown you gave us on Daniel Dubois versus Joe Parker. The main event is Artur Beterbiev stepping back into the ring with rival Dmitry Bivol. He got the victory in a razor close fight the first time round. They're stepping in again very quickly for the second one. Who do you think wins that one, the undisputed light heavyweight clash?
I thought Bivol won the first fight. And not by a wide margin, but I really thought that he won a lot of the early rounds. He showed that he is pound for pound one of the best boxers in the world, and he's been in that category for a long, long time. A guy that has a tremendous boxing IQ, can analyze and counter the style of any type of style. He's a tremendous boxer and a tremendous talent of being able to measure the distance and control the distance in the ring. And Beterbiev, what can we say? One of the greatest punchers that we've ever seen in the light heavyweight division. A menacing, scary guy. I think at the age of 40, it's going to be very, very hard for him to keep improving and to keep developing. And I think Bivol at the age of 34 still has that little bit of a skip in his step. I believe he's a smarter boxer. Not a bit, definitely doesn't have the power of Beterbiev. But as far as skill goes, I think that there will be some adjustments made, and I expect to see him win the rematch.
Kevin, we'll wrap it up there. Been a pleasure speaking to you. Hopefully, speak to you a lot sooner than the gap of absence of time since our previous conversation. But thank you once again. It's been a pleasure, and we'll speak again very soon.
Ayman, it's always great to talk with you, my friend, and all your listeners on Seconds Out. Take it easy, my man.
Looking forward to our next one. Thank you, Kevin.
Bye.